Welcome to Story of Time, where every moment in history has a story waiting to be told. Here, we don't just talk about the past. We experience it. From the rise of powerful empires to their dramatic falls. From legendary leaders to forgotten voices. This is history, told like never before. Now, picture this. An empire that once ruled across continents. Now standing alone, surrounded by enemies. Its fate hanging by a thread. As the world plunged into World War I, the Ottoman Empire faced its greatest test. This wasn't just another war. It was a desperate fight to survive. What led to this moment? Who were the heroes? And who were the villains? And how did this final struggle reshape the world we live in today? You're about to witness history unfold. Subscribe to Story of Time and join this journey through the past. Like and support the channel to help bring more powerful stories to life. Because every empire falls. But its story lives on. The Empire on the Edge. By the early 20th century, the Ottoman Empire was a shadow of its former glory. Once stretching from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia, it had earned the nickname the sick man of Europe. But this label hid a deeper truth. The empire was not simply weak, it was unraveling. For centuries, the Ottomans had ruled over a vast mosaic of peoples: Turks, Arabs, Kurds, Armenians, Greeks, and more. This diversity had once been a strength, held together by careful governance and shared economic systems. But by the late 1800s, nationalism began to tear at this delicate balance. Inspired by movements in Europe, various groups within the empire started demanding independence. At the same time, European powers, especially Britain, France, and Russia, were circling like predators. They saw the Ottoman lands not as a sovereign state, but as spoils waiting to be divided. Every internal rebellion, every economic crisis, gave these powers another excuse to intervene. Internally, reformers tried to save the empire. The Young Turks rose to power in 1908, promising modernization and unity. They sought to centralize authority, strengthen the military, and revive the empire's fortunes. But their reforms came at a cost: increased tensions among ethnic groups and harsh crackdowns on dissent. Then came the Balkan Wars, a devastating blow. In just a few short years, the Ottomans lost nearly all their European territories. Cities that had been Ottoman for centuries were gone. Millions of Muslim refugees flooded into Anatolia, bringing stories of violence and loss. The empire wasn't just shrinking, it was bleeding. By 1914, the Ottomans faced a terrifying reality: survive or disappear. The leadership knew neutrality in the coming global conflict might not save them. Instead, they gambled on alliance, choosing to side with Germany, hoping that a powerful partner could help them reclaim lost prestige and protect what remained. But this decision would drag the empire into a war unlike any it had ever faced. The stage was set. The empire was cornered. And the fight for survival was about to begin. Entering the Inferno. When the World War I erupted in Europe, the Ottomans hesitated, but not for long. In November 1914, they officially entered the war on the side of the Central Powers. It was a decision born of desperation and ambition. At the heart of this choice was Enver Pasha, a key figure among the Young Turks. He believed that aligning with Germany would not only secure the empire's survival but also allow it to reclaim lost territories. But ambition can blind even the most determined leaders. The first major Ottoman campaign was against Russia in the harsh winter of the Caucasus. It was a disaster. Poor planning, freezing temperatures, and inadequate supplies led to the deaths of tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers, many of whom never even saw the enemy. The dream of a quick victory evaporated into the snow. Meanwhile, the Allies launched their own plans to dismantle the empire. One of the most famous, and brutal, was the Gallipoli campaign. British and French forces, along with troops from Australia and New Zealand, aimed to seize control of the Dardanelles Strait and capture Constantinople. But here, the Ottomans made a stunning stand. Under the leadership of commanders like Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, Ottoman troops fought with relentless determination. They knew what was at stake. Defeat could mean the end of their homeland. Against overwhelming odds, they held their ground. The beaches of Gallipoli became a graveyard for thousands, and a symbol of Ottoman resistance. Yet victory in one place did not mean security everywhere. Across the Middle East, new fronts opened. In Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, British forces pushed toward Baghdad. In the Arabian Peninsula, unrest began to simmer. The empire was fighting on multiple fronts, stretching its already fragile resources to the breaking point. And perhaps most dangerously, the war began to expose deep fractures within the empire itself. Fractures within. As the war dragged on, the Ottoman Empire faced not only external enemies but internal collapse. The pressures of total war magnified every weakness, economic, political, and social. One of the most controversial and tragic chapters of this period was the treatment of the Armenian population. Ottoman authorities, fearing rebellion and collaboration with Russia, ordered mass deportations of Armenians from eastern Anatolia. What followed remains one of the most debated and painful topics in history: the Armenian genocide. Hundreds of thousands, possibly over 1 million, Armenians perished through forced marches, starvation, and violence. Historians widely recognize this as genocide, though interpretations and political debates continue to this day. This event left a scar not only on the region but on global history. Meanwhile, in the Arab provinces, another threat emerged. The Arab Revolt, led by figures like Sharif Hussein of Mecca and supported by the British, aimed to break Ottoman control over the Arabian Peninsula. Promises of independence fueled the rebellion, but those promises would later prove complicated. The revolt wasn't just a military challenge, it was symbolic. It showed that the empire was losing its grip on loyalty and unity. Regions that had once been firmly under Ottoman control were now slipping away. Economically, the empire was in ruins. Trade routes were disrupted, inflation soared, and food shortages became common. Civilians suffered immensely. Cities once bustling with commerce turned into places of hunger and despair. Despite all this, the Ottomans continued to fight. Their survival instinct drove them forward, even as the ground beneath them crumbled. The collapse. By 1918, the end was near. The Central Powers were collapsing one by one. Germany was on the brink of defeat, and without its strongest ally, the Ottomans stood little chance. British forces advanced relentlessly through the Middle East. Cities like Jerusalem and Damascus fell. The dream of holding onto Arab lands vanished. Ottoman armies, exhausted and undersupplied, could no longer resist effectively. At the same time, internal dissent grew louder. The population was war-weary. Soldiers deserted. Confidence in leadership evaporated. In October 1918, the empire signed the Armistice of Mudros. It was effectively a surrender. Allied forces soon occupied Constantinople, the heart of the empire. But the humiliation didn't end there. The victorious powers drafted the Treaty of Sèvres, which aimed to carve up the Ottoman lands among the Allies. Greece, Italy, France, and Britain all claimed pieces. Even Armenia and Kurdistan were to be established as separate states. For many Ottomans, this was not peace, it was annihilation. Yet from this collapse, something unexpected began to rise. From ashes to a new beginning. Out of the ruins of the Ottoman Empire emerged a new struggle, not for empire, but for nationhood. Led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, Turkish nationalists rejected the Treaty of Sevres. They launched the Turkish War of Independence, fighting against occupying forces and reclaiming control over Anatolia. This was a different kind of war. No longer about preserving a multi-ethnic empire, it was about creating a unified Turkish state. The struggle was fierce, but ultimately successful. In 1923, the Treaty of Lausanne replaced Sevres, recognizing the sovereignty of the new Republic of Turkey. The Ottoman Empire, after more than 600 years, was officially gone. But its legacy lived on, in borders drawn across the Middle East, in unresolved conflicts, and in the memories of those who lived through its final days. The Ottoman fight for survival in World War I was not just a military story. It was a human story of ambition, fear, resilience, and transformation. The fall of the Ottoman Empire reminds us that even the greatest powers are not immune to collapse. Empires rise, expand, and eventually face the test of survival. In World War I, the Ottomans fought with everything they had, but history had already begun to turn. Their end reshaped the modern world, leaving behind borders, tensions, and legacies that still influence global politics today. From the trenches of Gallipoli to the deserts of Arabia, this was more than a war. It was the final chapter of an empire, and the beginning of a new era. History never truly ends. It echoes into the present. If you felt the rise, the struggle, and the fall of an empire, then you're already part of the story. Like the video to support more cinematic history. Subscribe to Story of Time for powerful stories from the past. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Because every empire, every war, every moment is a story worth remember.